Hey everyone, here is a screencast set of notes for chapter 1. I think we attempted a discussion one day and didn't get very far earlier. And then I did screencast some about the science of nature, deductive, inductive reasoning. So you have some notes, but these first 20 plus slides of chapter 1 notes is a lot of review content, and I'm hoping don't need a lot of explanation. If you are looking through any of these concepts as I whiz through them, they're confusing you, go back and reread, go back and look in the book, but also feel free to come in and ask questions if you have any. The first section is trying to point out that we are still discovering things. Look at this cute little Pinocchio frog. When it gets excited, its nose pops out. And over the years, I've been adding here and there different species that have been discovered. I should have probably updated for 2022, but this link here to 2018 were the top 10 new animals or new organisms in 2018, and you can do that for 2022. And the idea is we're still discovering organisms. There's roughly 1.3 million named species, and at the rate of which we discover them, there are thought to be up to 8 million species yet to, or in total. So what is biology? Again, if you need me to answer this question, then maybe you shouldn't be in this class, but study of life, a scientific approach to understanding life on this big, beautiful planet. So the question is, why do we study it? Well, we're ultimately trying to understand how life works and us fitting in as part of it. To understand just how it works in general, it's called pure science. So a lot of universities are working in pure science. But oftentimes, universities included, but businesses will have scientists hired to work on improvements or in the field of medicine, working for what's called applied science, using science of biology to understand and use that knowledge for a specific purpose. They call that applied science. So if you're trying to develop a medicine that cures something, that's applied science. When you talk about applied science, oftentimes there's economic incentive for that. So if you're trying to develop a medication, that has value. And so a lot of times our applied science efforts are also towards helping us make a living, which we all need to do too. So where do humans fit into this natural scheme of things? I hope this is remnant of your thoughts on Aldo Leopold. We are dependent upon living systems of the world and shouldn't really think of ourselves as separate from it. That gets us into trouble. What are our basic necessities? Again, obvious things like clean water, food, and natural resources. Ecologically speaking, what's our impact on the living systems of the world? Well, again, from what we've learned in general bio, I hope you remember that we're kind of hard on this earth. Our wants definitely outpace our needs, and if we don't keep those in check, we're going to keep hurting where we're at. The extinction rate currently is 1,000 times faster than in past mass extinction situations, so prior to humans. They're actually talking, or scientists are discussing the fact that we might be in what's known as the 6th extinction. This is the 6th mass extinction, and the only one where humans are not only part of, but the cause of. And so when we lose species, we are losing biodiversity. So obviously, we can't live on this planet without having impact on it, because we use natural resources, we use land space for food production, deforestation to use the wood for products and or change the landscape for food production, extracting things from the earth for mining purposes, and then developing our cities, towns, etc. So those things aren't going to go away, but we maybe can think about how we do those things and do them differently that can maybe be more sustainable or at least keep things ecologically more in check. Levels of organization. Again, basic concept of biology you should already know, starting with the basic unit of matter, the atom. Hopefully you also know that atoms are made of subatomic particles like protons, neutrons as part of the nucleus, and electrons orbiting around that nucleus. Know a little bit about atomic number versus atomic mass. So basic chemistry. And how atoms form molecules and compounds. But ultimately, the first level where life begins to take shape, or as a characteristic, would be at the cellular level. The basic unit of life is a cell. Basic unit of matter is an atom. When we pool a bunch of similar cells together that have one particular function, we call that a tissue. We will talk about the different tissue types like muscle, nervous, epithelial, and connective, and how they can all work together collectively to form your different organs. And those organs may work together in conjunction to make a whole organ system. Tie your organ systems together to make the whole organism. And again, that's if you're multicellular, like we are. So organism would be the individual, but if they're similar species in the same area, then you are talking about a population. Communities are all the living things in a particular defined area. If you also include the non-living factors that affect living things, you're talking about ecosystems. And those large, broad ecosystems are sometimes referred to as biomes. If we look at collectively all the biomes on the planet, or collectively the whole planet, we're talking about the biosphere, where on the planet life exists. So life emerges at the cell level. Here is a visual of those levels of organization. Again, make sure you know those subatomic particles. Positively charged protons, neutral neutrons making the nucleus, and electrons have a negative charge. When we study biology, sometimes we can get really up close at the molecular level. So molecular biologists, sometimes they study the larger picture, whole ecosystems, communities within ecosystems, or specific populations. So here you're focusing in on more ecologically, and here at a more fine-tuned look. As you change these, again, go through these levels of organization, the higher up on the levels of organization, the more relationships are important, and the less you worry about the mechanics. When you're looking at things happening at a cellular molecular level, you're looking at kind of a mechanical understanding, or mechanistic understanding on how things work. I hope you understand living versus non-living as a concept. Characteristics that all living things have. So all living things, you have to constantly add inputs of energy to keep them alive. And they also need to take in matter to keep them alive. And the matter cycles, the energy flows one way through living things. all living things are able to carry out this process called homeostasis, which is about adjusting to a changing environment, externally and or internally, to keep constant or balanced internally. And all organisms have DNA, which they inherited from previous cells, and take it back further, parent to parent is a transfer generationally of that DNA. So all things on this earth consist of the same building blocks, matter. Atoms joined up as molecules, molecules forming compounds. But to be a living thing, it has to have these things listed above. They have to have cells, at least one. They have to be able to do homeostasis and pass on genetic information generationally. So even though a virus has DNA, it's not a living thing because it can't take in and use its own energy. So it doesn't have its own metabolism. It relies on the host cell's metabolism and energy. It can't respond to changes in its environment either. So it can't carry on homeostasis. This is maybe a new term for you, but it's not that complicated if you think of my analogy example coming up. So emergent properties are, as you move up a level of organization, properties emerge that weren't part of the collective pieces that were in that earlier level. So for example, your digestive system collectively has properties that just your stomach doesn't have by itself, or just your esophagus doesn't have by itself. The property of life, energy, matter regulation, homeostasis, DNA, and reproduction, those characteristics emerge at the level of the cell. If you go just to molecules, compounds, atoms, they don't have those three things. So that emergent property of life happens at the cellular level. Here's my analogy. Flour, egg, sugar, butter, vanilla, chocolate, chips, each have their own properties as ingredients. But when you mix those ingredients, add a little bit of energy in the oven, you have then the property of a chocolate chip cookie. Now if you describe the properties of a chocolate chip cookie, it is completely different in any one of those ingredients by themselves. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Anyone recognize this basketball phenom of the past? If you follow basketball, you might know Lindsay Whalen. Minnesota's own, from Hutchinson, I believe, originally. But think of what your heart can do, pump blood. But the properties of that heart by itself, the properties of heart are different when you get that whole organism. So what Lindsay Whalen is able to do with that heart when it's as part of whole organ systems working together in an organism, you get a lot of different properties in that whole person as opposed to that individual heart. All right, basic life requirements. It gets us back to energy and matter. So energy is defined as the capacity to do work. Doesn't cycle, it flows through world of life in one direction. Not to get confused with the boy band. And what are nutrients? That's matter, atoms, molecules, essential to grow, that we can't make for ourselves. Cycle between organisms and the environment. And we'll stop here for a screencast break.